No, it's fine. I guess I never thought of that. Yeah. Like, yeah. It's still working?
I'm not turning bottom button, red button. I just said leave all of them on.
Hello?
These are the ones that like either are here or they're duplicates.
We're recording. Yes. Nadine will. So look to Nadine if because it's all 2 minutes. Everyone has like 2 minutes. So then she'll like let us know when people are past 2 minutes. Oh, like look at them too. Yeah, look at them too.
Yeah, if somebody just moved hands. So we know.
Also, if you did not get your name tag, go get your name tag. They're up here.
No, did you have that in RCS? I did. So it should be
Caroline's
here.
Undal, do you have your name tag?
She has one. I
Other
know there's
two.
more. There's
Vernon,
more
okay.
here.
Remy, do you have your name tag? Oh, we printed multiple then.
There's some duplicates.
Do you want to go back to the office and find, or like get paper, and just have them write their name?
To get in the office.
What? Oh, you don't have your key? Okay. Da, 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 da. Wonderful. Okay, are you guys all set?
Yeah, we're gonna.
Okay. I wish I had my gavel.
Oh, I'm sorry. Whatever time is up for them, if we don't catch it, just like start raising hands so that I know if you don't talk them. Because I'm not looking at any time, so I don't know. It's like, because someone's nothing that people like to do. That would be like. We tried.
That's her name.
Yes, please tell me about that placard. Could we like grab her Senate one so that she has one?
I think Ria should be coming back with like paper and stuff.
Okay.
So and if it's the Sean. Okay, we're gonna start because I feel like we're kind of late. Sliders there. Delete all those so you don't click on them accidentally. Okay. We are recording. Wonderful. Put that. Okay. Wonderful.
I appreciate it. I did see that.
Okay. Okay. Hi, everyone. Okay, we're going to start now. So please stop talking. Okay, welcome everyone to the first ever student policy forum. Thank you. We haven't done this before, so hopefully everything runs smoothly. So yeah, we are working jointly with the Student Bar Association and the Evans Student Organization to really focus on the policies within all of your campaign statements and like kind of develop that more as you talk about them today. So yeah. So how the forum works, I kind of explained it in the email I sent you all, but each candidate for the first question was randomly chosen out of all the candidates within that specific office. The questions are based on their campaign statement in the voter's guide. So you can grab a voter's guide if you want to see like the statements of the other candidates, and if you're an audience member up front. And again, there are 2 minutes response for each of the candidates during that specific question period, and there will be 5 minutes for audience questions. And then there was a Slido for anyone in the audience to ask questions. And if you are a candidate, please kind of refrain from trying to ask questions to the other candidates, because that would be kind of weird. But yeah. So yeah, again, the voter's guides are up front. That's the QR code for the voter's guide if you want to have an online version. So yeah, do you guys want to introduce yourselves actually?
Hey, hi everyone, my name is Ellie. I am a 1L representative for the Student Bar Association over at the law school. Thanks for coming out. We're excited to go to the forum and learn more about the policy of the candidates.
Hi, everybody. My name is Josie. I am a grad school graduating this year at the Evans School of Public Policy and Governance, and I serve as their vice president of students.
Thank you guys for showing up. Okay, so okay, just another reminder, Nadine, who is sitting up there, if you want to raise your hand to everyone, we'll be tracking everyone's time so you guys can see your total time that you've been speaking during that question. So yeah, just she'll let us know like if you guys gone past 2 minutes and like you guys should stop talking at that point so we can have all the other candidates to speak during their time as well. So yeah. So we will now have, and that's where you can have the Slido. So if you want to scan that quickly or not. And we'll have this slide like after each question. So we will now begin with campus partnerships. So if all the campus partnership candidates can sit at the table. You're fine. You just sit down. You guys want to tap the mic just to make sure it works? Okay, thank you.
Right. Okay, so our first question is for Cranston. You discussed your plan to cooperate with campus safety partners on programs like Husky Night Ride to address student safety concerns. What are your plans when it comes to Husky Night Ride, and what are some other issues that relate to student safety?
Hi, hello everyone. My name is Cranston. I'm running to be your Director of Campus Partnerships. And my Husky Night Ride plan is that I've heard a lot of people talking a lot about how, especially when it gets darker during the winter months and towards the end of the fall quarter, it can be kind of hard to really properly utilize the service. This is a smaller part within my bigger platform plan to kind of be able to serve every student. And to be able to serve every student, it requires us to be able to serve any student. That means anybody who's kind of has different situations going on, people who need to get home sooner, people who can't wait until 8 p.m. when the service starts, people who feel physically maybe unsafe walking around the U district and the Ave. And I mean, this is just one piece of my platform again, because really I believe it's necessary to kind of reckon with safety in the sense of physical safety, but also in the sense of making sure that students feel supported by UW. And what that looks like, I think, being able to expand the Husky Night Rides hours to earlier, maybe to 7 p.m., maybe even to 6:30 p.m. when it gets darker earlier in the day, is also the same idea that I want to bring into addressing counseling and being able to make sure that people aren't waiting up to 10 days for being able to get a counseling appointment when they have issues and situations that arise in a quicker time frame than that. So I mean, a lot of my platform is I really want to focus on physical and mental wellness. I also think that a big part of what I want to do is to really work with UW-PD and try to expand our mental health crisis intervention team to make sure that we have more unarmed professionals who are able to deal with mental health crises at all hours of the day, not just 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. But thank you for the question, and thank you for hosting to the organizers.
Thank you so much. So our second question is going to be for the other candidates. What are some other student safety initiatives that you plan to undertake while in office?
Hello, everyone. My name is Moti Galetto. I'm here. So for one of my safety initiatives, I want to work on expanding the UW alert system. I want to implement real-time updates and clear communication. I want to work on like consistent follow-up communication for when events happen from start to finish. And I also want to work on making clear, actionable messaging for what to do, especially in high stressful situations. If you're a stressful individual like me who gets anxious, sometimes when stuff hit the fan, you might not know what to do. So I think that's very important, especially for our Fed first year students who may not know what to do in these stressful situations. So I also want to work on implementing more accessibility for the UW alert system. So I want to include commonly spoken campus languages. I'm East African. There's a lot of East Africans here at UW. And so I want to work on, adding more languages that represent some of the populations that are here. And then I want to work on having the ASL accessible formats such as video or audio alerts or text-based transcripts, so that way you can reach other people with other abilities as well. And my biggest takeaway is just, I believe that every student deserves to be informed regardless of your language or your ability, especially in these, safety situations. And for a lot of students like me who live in U District, you guys know how it gets at night sometimes. So I think it's very important for students like us to really know what's going on and have that effective communication channel, so that way we can all be safe at all times. So yeah, thank you guys for the question. Happy New Year.
Hi, everybody. My name is Audrey. So first of all, I think that safety is a human right and everybody deserves to feel safe in a place where they can get an education. So I want to start by establishing a student health advisory board. And I want to make sure that those meetings are public so that students can come and express their concerns. I want to make sure that UWPD also knows about the student concerns, which would be by meeting with them afterwards. I want to make sure that there's also more unarmed safety officers on campus that are trained to deal with mental health crises, because sometimes there's no need for force in certain situations. Next, I want to improve the safety zone app. I want to do this by expanding the regions to Ravenna Park. So that'll include the University District, because I personally live in a place where the safety zone app does not help me. So I want to make sure that students that live near Ravenna Boulevard can get the help that they need. Then I want to do the Husky Safe trip by expanding service hours. This would be maybe 6:30 to 4 a.m. because I know that students stay out late. So it's important that they get the help that they need. Thank you guys.
Okay, do we have any audience questions for the candidates? I also have the Slido pulled up, so if you want to submit any questions on Slido, I can see those as well.
Well, we gotta test it. Is it working? That's a good question.
Yes,
So I think all of you
Wait, so
mentioned we having,
sorry. you just-
so I think all of you mentioned having unarmed responses to mental health crises, especially at night or when there's a need for an emergency response, which is consistent with standing a student body opinion. How would you go forward with securing funding for increased mental health responders? And how would this also go hand in hand with taking stances on policies divesting from UWPD?
any of you go.
Can you repeat the question one time?
So,
Just go back.
so all of you stated, I think, that you wanted to have increased ability to respond to any crises with an unarmed response for people who are having a mental health focused response, which is consistent with standing student body opinion. How would you achieve funding for this? More importantly, how would you achieve admin and administrator support for this? And would this result, and would you be also advocating for that continued divestment of UWPD from the student body?
I think a lot of us kind of touched on this, whether it's in our platform statements or in your answers. Safety, student wellness, student health is a big topic and a big component on a lot of our platforms. So I would say for me personally, if I were to be elected for this position, I would keep that as the forefront. Because at the end of the day, money's fixed, funds are fixed, right? But I would really emphasize the fact that this is about student wellness. This is about safety, right? And like you said, it's consistent with, the student body, everyone's opinion. So I would say that would be my forefront in terms of securing funds and working with UWPD. Yeah, hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think what you're hinting to is that we're going through a lot of changes and a lot of things can be at risk right now. But I mean, from my knowledge, UWPD has been pretty understaffed as of recent, or I don't know if they're still understaffed, but maybe someone can fact check me on that. And I think this kind of goes to reflect how when UWPD can be called a lot for mental health responses, they just don't really know what to do. So I think kind of being the liaison communicator between ASU Dub and UWPD is going to be really important to have an active voice in kind of setting a new vision and creating new goals. And I think it's going to be really important to make sure that we emphasize how UWPD and UWPD's budget can be kind of shuffled around a little bit, for lack of a better word, in order to better fund kind of mental health crisis responses. But it's definitely not going to be something that's going to take, it's not a decision that we would feel the effects of overnight. And it's also definitely something difficult to be transparent about just because of UW bureaucracy and the special considerations we have to look at when it comes to UWPD. But thank you for that question. I really think that it'll be important to just keep advocating, keep emphasizing that this is not going to be something that's going to happen overnight, first and foremost. And second, that we need to really have a kind of shift in goals and what we want to do going forward with UWPD. But that's all I have to say about that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think that with funds, it's definitely everybody has concerns because nobody knows budget cuts or anything that's happening at the university. But I think that one way that I would go about it is talking to admin, which is also a provost, and the VP of campus safety, just to see how we can reallocate funds and have like student surveys too, to see how students, where they want those funds to go, like you said. Because I can tell you're very passionate about that issue, and that's something that I would want to hear about. Yeah.
Nadine, do we have time for Nadine? Do we have time for one more question? Okay, sorry. Then thank you guys. You're free to go back to your chairs. And then we have an announcement from Rio.
Sorry, I just came in, but you guys did good. I just want to say best of luck. And also if you after this, if you have a break in the middle after this, if you want to get your stamps, the loyalty card stamp, please do so, but you're gonna kill it and just be yourself. And yeah, have fun.
Thank you, Ria. Okay. Okay. We will now be moving on to the community relations candidates. So if you all can sit at the table. Why'd you? Oh, what happened?
Right. So our first question for the community relations candidates, this one is specifically for Jessica to begin with. We discussed your plan to work with first year programs to ensure a comfortable transition for new students. Can you elaborate on what additions or changes you would make to the current first year programs to aid in a better transition for incoming students?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you to this magical randomizer that allowed me to speak on this topic. First of all, my goal is to make the transition into college not just smoother, but more affirming and community oriented for all students, especially focusing on those with vulnerable backgrounds, commuter students, and first generation students who take up so much of our student population here. Going to college or just a new environment in itself is extremely hard for many people. And first year programs already does such an amazing job at covering these basics and covering all the bases that are very much what students need coming into UW. However, I believe that we can go further by embedding more intentional community building and identity affirming programs. Coming into the school myself, I had such a hard time finding out what resources there were, centers that UW had to offer, all of these different things that my tuition goes to and all of your guys' tuition goes to, that you really just don't know where it's going and how much it can provide for you. An idea I'd love to work on if elected for this position is implementing an elevated structure to FIGs and amplifying the first year program. First of all, I think that FIG leaders hold a very important role in their first year students. And I think that they should be able to have campus involvement a part of their curriculum by partnering with campus partnerships and creating these incentives for students to join these campus involvements, join these RSOs and student organizations. Additionally, I'd like to work with provosts to allow free parking for commuter students during orientation and dog days. This parking situation is so prominent in many of these things for commuter students who are 70% of our population. Additionally, I think that the ASUW Board of Directors, Office of Minority Affairs and Diversity, Student Advisory Board, and other representatives should come into these FIGs and make themselves known to these students as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. For the other candidates, what are other policies or practices regarding incoming students that you intend to enact if elected?
Hey everyone, my name is Tanya Bandari. Thanks so much for having me. I think it's one thing to talk about sort of making this process for first year students a lot more inclusive, and another thing to really break it down into actionable policies. We are here at the Student Policy Forum. And so I've been so fortunate this year to have had the opportunity to work on writing policy, implementing policy, working on advocating for students' individual stories through Student Senate, but also in some administrative spaces. And so I really wanted to break down for you right now in terms of really specific things what that would look like for me if elected to Director of Community Relations. So I think one thing that's important to do is build on top of all the amazing things the first year programs already do. And a lot of times that could look like when it comes to orientation, they talk about night ride and they talk about night walk and UW Alert and these safety programs. But a lot of students don't actually have the opportunity to interact and experience those different features that we have here at UW until they have a bad experience later into their first year and then they recognize, oh, this is a resource I should take advantage of. So making sure students have more of that opportunity to interact with whether it's the police department or night walk during orientation, I think, is very important. Also for international students, making sure they're connected with that legal support during orientation before they step foot onto campus, especially based on what is going on right now, is super, super, super important. But also, I think there's some initiatives that ASUW can kind of put together on our own. You know, first year Fridays at the Hub or the Commuter Transfer Commons. And I talk about reinstating Parnassus in these community spaces a lot, but I think that's important to make sure that students are assimilated really well into UW culture, and they have that space and community to connect and co-host events. I think it would be great to have, you know, for commuter students, priority registration when it comes to FIG, so they don't have to select 8:30 a.m. classes, right? Looking at stuff like that, making sure that we're supporting students who are coming in that are suffering from food insecurity by working with RCSA and the ASUW Food Co-op and our food bank and Bean Basket, and making sure they really have access to those resources. But I'm really excited. I'm glad I had this opportunity to break down some policy for you. Thank you so much for having me.
Hi everyone, my name is Brandon Cohen, and I'm so honored and glad to be here today sitting in front of you guys. I just want to start off by saying that, as stated in my platform statement, I'm deeply committed to supporting incoming students as they transition into college life. As an upcoming FIG leader, I believe that is my first and only priority to make sure all first year students have the smoothest transition into college. Speaking from someone who did not exactly have that his freshman year, I would strongly advocate for all first year students to have the utmost and smoothest transition to college, whether that be promoting marketing resources for them to utilize when they need to. One of the incentives I really want to really use in my upcoming FIG leader classroom is to expose them to as many resources that UW has to offer, which is something I want to implement into my role as community relations director as well. And something I plan on doing if I were elected is making a first year advisory board. I think that this ensures the voices of freshmen and transfer students are heard and reflected in ASUW conversation. This would be a group of freshmen that I would, along with other interns I plan to hire as well, a group of freshmen and transfer students who meet monthly and discuss what's working, what's not working, and just report back to me whenever they need, whenever things are brought up. I think wellness check-ins are also really important. I can say for me as well as a lot of other people here that midterms and final seasons are probably the roughest times to be a college student. And so just implementing as much email reminders or text reminders with mental health tips, event invites, or just resources around campus, especially during those rough weeks. And one of the last things I really want to, not one of the last things, but something I really do want to implement the most is a first gen student network. As a first gen student, I feel like it is important to highlight as many events, alumni events, or just resources for them to use and collaborating with entities during the year.
Thank you, Brandon. Okay. Wonderful. Okay. Now we will go on to our Slido questions and see if anyone asked anything. Test. Wonderful. Okay.
I don't see any questions in the Slido. Does anybody have any questions in the audience that they'd like to ask?
Sean.
Um,
Thank you.
So currently, even prior to the rapidly shifting landscape, this is very biased towards College of Arts and Science as a question. Since only functioning governments tend to prioritize funding arts and science, we're currently in a shifting landscape where a lot of my peers, I'm a postdoc, recent UW alumni, a lot of my peers are finding ourselves like either getting career advancement or not getting career advancement based on decisions we made in our first year, and depending on how well resourced and how well networked we were in our first year of undergrad. How would you go forward making sure that, given the diverse array of departments and colleges we have, that every first year is getting the necessary networking of resources for their desired major, for their desired department, rather than just having blanket approaches which may serve a lot, but not all of the first years at UW?
I love that question. One, especially because I'm a computer science and political science double major. And so although both of those majors are in the College of Arts and Sciences, it's a completely different experience. And I completely see that. Different networks, different opportunities, different sources of funding. And I think really what's important to me, and I've talked about this also as director of community relations, your constituents are so many students from so many different backgrounds, right? It's international students and commuter students and transfer students, students pursuing a lot of different majors, students who this is the first time at college. And I think the way to address what you're talking about, there's so many different angles we could take, right? Addressing funding, addressing, our voter outreach and how we're reaching out to students and pulling them into ASU Dub spaces, making sure they're not just liberal arts majors or poli-sci majors, right? But they're majors from a really sort of diverse set of academia. But I think what's also really important there is just making sure that a lot of our policies are addressing students in a very big picture manner. I think that's really important. Looking at how do we serve all students, and making sure we're very attuned to realizing that, oh, this policy is actually caretaking to a certain department, certain set of students, because we have our own biases. And so making sure, again, we bring a lot of different students into that process. But I'll hand it over to other candidates. But great question. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for this question. Well, I think that, when I was looking into these FIGs and these Gen Study courses, when I was creating my candidate platform to make sure I was well informed on these things, I noticed that there was a new Kickstarter course called Gen Studies 205, specifically for transfer students, specifically for students who are technically no longer freshmen or no longer in their first year of their higher education. And I noticed different things that they had in their curriculum compared to what we had, or I had in my curriculum when I was in a FIG. The biggest thing that I noticed was this section called Plan Your Future and Build Networks. Create a comprehensive academic career, develop strategies and networking. And, FIG classes first began in 1987. I do think it's time to revamp it and make sure that things can stay relevant and make sure they stay consistent with what we need now today. And I think that now seeing, and this point that you make is that all these times are changing and all these careers are kind of taking their different points and ways and all of these things. And I think that we should be able to implement those things from the transfer student Gen Studies into these first year Gen Studies courses as well. Because I think that networking in our day and age and career lifestyles and all of those things are really valuable to what we have for our future and for our future professions. And so I think that implementing those parts of curriculum from the transfer students Gen Studies would be really valuable for other first year programs as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much for the question. I want to start by saying that I want to speak from personal experience that I went into UW not knowing what I wanted to do or not knowing what I wanted to study. It took a lot of, I will admit, it took a whole year for me to finally settle down and choose communications as something I wanted to do. One of those reasons being I just wasn't really well informed about all the departments on campus. I will blame myself for not doing the most research, but also because I just wasn't really exposed to a lot of the resources I had to make me choose the path that I wanted. And one of the things that really helped me out throughout this journey was an academic advisor. I want to work with all the advisors on campus, whether it just be specifically department advisors or just academic advisors in general. I want to have conversations with them with anything that they plan on working with for first year students. I want to give them my input on what helps and what doesn't help. Because I can definitely say I really love my advisor, but there were a couple things that she did tell me about that wasn't really the best advice. And so just having those kind of workshops, and having those kind of conversations with them to make sure they have the students' best interest and the students' feedback at heart. Because at the end of the day, they do not, we all work with students, including advisors, and so we want to implement the best advice and the best steer towards the best path as possible. And something I do really want to do in regards to your question is I want to work with the first year programs to really maybe just implement a new kind of curriculum into the first year program. I really do have close connections with some of the people in the first year programs. I really do want to give them my input on certain things that they are trying to implement within the next fall quarter and see what works, what doesn't work, and hopefully from there we can come up with any new agendas or new ways of teaching the first year students about as much opportunities on campus as possible in order to get them on the right track.
Thank you, Brandon. And that is the community relations candidates. Thank you. You guys going to all back to your seats. Okay, I'm gonna pull an Autumn and ask that you guys wait to applause until after like everyone's answered the question. So thank you, so we can kind of like have enough time for everyone at the end. And you want to take off? All the calls.
Guys, programming candidates, please come to the podium. Y'all been doing a good job, so let's see that follow. Come on, Owen, let's go. Be faster.
Okay. The first question that we have is for Grace. You spoke about the importance of accessibility of RSOs and on-campus events. What are some ideas you have to increase the accessibility of events for students with disabilities?
I'm going to take this side and stand. Hi, my name is Grace. I'm super excited to be here, and I'm super excited to speak on accessibility as a disability studies major and also an ally of the disabled community on campus and in the broader Seattle area. I'm just super passionate about accessibility. I have tons of ideas, so I'm going to try to get them all out. I think first and foremost, codifying that groups must collaborate with the Office of Inclusive Design, especially with ASUW events. I think that the Office of Inclusive Design is an incredible resource we have, and definitely is underutilized. So for both RSOs and ASUW in general events. Also, the RSO Leadership Summit, something that I'm passionate about, like I said, accessibility. So including accessibility training in the RSO Leadership Summit so that RSO leaders are able to execute this accessibility in their RSO spaces and any events they might host. Another idea I have is increasing the accessibility features on the interactive campus map. There are certain features on there already that are super helpful, but not the terrain, which I've heard from friends and colleagues that is one of the most difficult parts about our campus to navigate as a disabled student, but also bus routes, thinking about transportation, thinking about how commuter students can access these events. I like to think about access as something that is as broad as can include all students.
And then finally, I want to amplify deaf and disabled voices in including them in ASUW town halls, collaborating with the ASUW president and the director of diversity efforts, partnering with specific RSOs and the student commissions to co-host town hall events to increase engagement in student policy. Because as y'all know, student policy is what runs this campus. So that's all I have, but thank you so much for having me and thank you guys for hosting.
Thank you so much. Okay, and then for the other candidates, what are your goals or plans for accessibility of events for this upcoming year?
So my name's Rhiannon. I use she, her pronouns, and I really agree with a lot of what Grace said. I think partnering with the Office of Inclusive Design to really utilize the resources they already have. They're able to provide like cart captioning and interpreters, but at the same time, they can provide that training that RSOs and other organizations on campus so dearly need to make their events and activities more accessible. So partnering with the Office of Inclusive Design, I also think it's really important that any ideas I'm bringing forward here today are just the beginning, and I'm sure there are many voices I'm not aware of. And so in my time as director of programming, I would work really hard to educate myself and to work with other populations to understand their needs first and foremost. Some specific ideas I have are for events, creating a lot of options. So for example, we have RSO fairs, and I think we should have more of those to promote community here on campus. But with those RSO fairs, we need to make sure they're super accessible. If the time of day isn't accessible to you, if the location isn't accessible, if it's too overcrowded and overstimulating, so you don't want to go, there should be an online option. And for that online option, a live stream doesn't make any sense. But instead, we can update the RSO guide that we already have, and then make ways for people to see who's at that RSO fair. What are they talking about? Are they promoting specific events or specific club happenings at that RSO fair? And then here's a contact button. I can go, oh, I'm online today. I'm not at the RSO fair. Let me email that that club and get a response while they're at the RSO fair already talking to students. For in-person events like ASUW's concerts, so the fall and spring shows, that's on the Hub Lawn, beautiful location, pretty central to campus, but it's on the grass. And if the grass is muddy or you have trouble traversing uneven terrain, you don't really want to be there. There's the pathway. The pathway is an option, but that's
Time, thank you. Okay.
Hi, my name is Remy, and I think Grace and Rhiannon touched on some really important topics that I totally agree with, especially the ones about using resources that we already have at UW and involving students in things that they might be able to help out with. For example, part of my campaign is that I want to increase awareness and accessibility to STI testing, and I wanted to be, and I know ACW's doing like the test right now, but I haven't heard of anybody actually engaging with it, and there hasn't been a lot of publicity for it. So really increasing that, but also seeing if nursing students want to help out with it, if we need more like manpower to make it work. So just like using people within the university to help other people within the university, I think is really smart. Same with social events, increasing safety and transportation is one of the ways to make the event more accessible. And so using the UW night rides, expanding how far they go, and if they can have like stops where people from further locations can all meet and then they just pick them up and take them. That sounded creepier than I wanted it to. But, and for safety, again, you know, using students who might be able to help out with that, or volunteers to help to constantly like walk students home or things like that if they know they live nearby. So just sort of organizing that, and obviously taking into account the Student Bar Association and at the school for their input, because I think for this sort of to execute this sort of thing, their input is going to be really, really valuable. And it would be nice to get their expertise while also giving their students a potential hands-on experience.
A.
Hi, everyone. My name is Owen Rivera, and first of all, thank you all for letting me be here. As a freshman that goes to UW and lives on campus, I found that there's a big accessibility problem to our ASU events. Hearing about an event the week of doesn't really allow a student to be able to fit it into their schedule. Although our Instagram does a really good job in advertising, I think that physical in-person posters in places like the Hub, dining halls, and even advertising on Denny Field could help students just know more about events. We could also put out sheets, sign-up sheets for students that may not have stable internet connection. However, I think this is only addressing part of the issue. And I think we need to not only increase the amount of advertising that we are putting out, but we also need to do this sooner. I think that at least 2 weeks in advance of an event should be the latest that we are starting our advertising. I would also like to work closely with the Office of Inclusive Design. We do really well with advertising on Instagram, but I see no reason for our relation to stop here. I think we should increase our cooperation to event planning so that they can help us and we can help them to make events that are more inclusive to all students at UW from start to finish. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. And we will have a question period. Let's see what happens.
Okay, perfect. I think I see one question here in the Slido, so I'll just read it out. What are some specific events or programming you would promote or create that you think would best benefit the student body?
Awesome. Well, I think another passion of mine outside of accessibility and disability justice is the arts. I'm currently part of a competitive acapella on campus, and I find that the most all-encompassing events that students find the most joy participating in are those where people have opportunities to be creative and also showcase UW talent. For example, our Fall Fling concert. There's usually UW bands that participate in that, as well as artists that students really enjoy, and that is under the guise of director of programming. So those are events that I would really enjoy planning, and also feature more local UW talent, have some more open mics, especially in on-campus housing spaces. I think are opportunities for first-year students and on-campus residents to build networks with each other, and also enjoy our time together in creating music and art. But yeah, that's my opinions. Thanks.
Please hold your applause. Thank you.
Okay, so I have a lot of different events that ASU UW already does that I, of course, would like to continue. The arts, providing those concerts, I think is vital. But a huge focus of mine is creating events that allow people from different disciplines, different backgrounds to really interact. For example, I'm in engineering and I get to interact with a lot of engineers. And I really love that. But I don't interact a whole lot in my day-to-day with people outside of engineering. And so I think hosting like there's engineering RSO fairs and then there's RSO fairs, but hosting events where it's not just about RSOs, but it's about like meeting people and getting together. So I think the concerts are a great way to do that. But I also think we should have more events where it's just like there's some food, come hang out. We've got like maybe it's live music, maybe it's maybe it's outside. There's just like a DJ or something, but it's just in a place where you can pass through, where it's not super busy for your schedule. I think that's really important just because I really like meeting people outside of my network. And I also know that if we're all going to go into the world someday and become professionals, we should have diverse perspectives. And we should be meeting people who aren't the same as us. And so I think inside classes, we don't quite get that. And inside our own RSOs, we don't get that. So I think there's a lot of different ways we can do this, and I'd love to hear from the student body, but events that really focus on everyone from across disciplines, across backgrounds.
Obviously, I already mentioned that I'm really big on increasing sexual health awareness, accessibility, so definitely finding ways to improve that and just make it a little more widespread, and taking it a little more seriously and a little more accessible. But apart from that, I think previous candidates, not just for programming, but the ones that already spoke, made some really good points about improving the technology for safety, like the alerts and then for the website and the apps and stuff. And I think that's a beautiful opportunity to involve computer science students or people who are interested in that sort of thing. college is kind of awesome because it's like The Sims and there's like always somebody for something. Like there's somebody who is going to be interested in working on a project, and I can figure to utilize that sort of diversity.
I think to create the best events at UW, we need to work with UW entities. Mainly, I would say RSOs and RCSA. I think that if we work with our communities that are on campus, like dorms, we could create small events that are not cost heavy. Something simple like in McMahon, they have a basketball court downstairs. We could have like a 3v3 tournament for basketball, something that doesn't require really anything except volunteer time and, you know, the willingness to do it. I think another big thing that we need to do though, is we need to work with our RSOs for our actual events. We need to do this because these communities are going to be what brings in people to our events. So working with them not working with them, it doesn't make any sense. Honestly, I think that we could also be doing a better job of promoting RSO events on, say, like our Instagram. I think that funding could go both ways. Say if an RSO has a fundraiser, we could promote that to help them get money for their event. Although I want to be your director of programming, that doesn't mean that I'm going to have the final say in what event is going to be when, where. I would like that to be up to the student through polls, surveys. I think we can find out what students really want. And once we do that, we can really plan events that will engage the most amount of students at UW. Thank you.
All right, thank you guys. You can return your seats. Thank you. We'll now be moving on to the diversity efforts candidates. So if you all can stand up, sit at the front table. Thank you. Oh.
Okay, we are going to go ahead and start with Valerie. And your question is, in your campaign statement, you mentioned the ongoing federal challenges surrounding DEI programs. In the face of federal and state financial uncertainty, how will you work to expand diversity initiatives across campus while working within any potential constraints that are outside of ASUW control?
It's true. DEI efforts are facing serious federal and state level challenges. The Department of Education recently issued a Dear Colleague letter threatening funding for institutions with diversity programs, and here in Washington, the state budget deficit can impact higher education and financial aid access. But even in this uncertain climate, I believe that we still have a lot to do. As someone who's been involved in ASUW lobbying, including leading a team at this year's Huskies on the Hill, I've seen how impactful student advocacy can be. But what stood out to me was that the very communities that were affected weren't always in the room, and that needs to change. As director, I'll use my position as chair of the JCC to strengthen inter-commission collaboration. I'll ensure that commissions are working together to identify shared goals and create programming that reflects the intersectional experiences of our students. I will also compel each commission to reach out to their constituents to encourage them to engage with our lobbying efforts, because majority of the issues that we lobby for pertain to the members of these commissions. I would collaborate with the Director of University Affairs and OGR to uplift student voices in advocacy, especially students in underrepresented communities who are often missing from these policy spaces. In order to do this, I want to institutionalize testimony prep workshops and lobby training for commission leaders and their communities so that they can speak to legislators and university administrators with power and confidence. Testimony is one of the most powerful tools that we have, and I've witnessed just how influential it could be in shaping policy outcomes. I also plan to collaborate with the Director of Programming to develop representative and community-rooted events. These programs could be grounded in feedback from commissions and tied directly to issues most urgent to students. Whether it's a town hall on state funding or teaching on legal threats to DEI, programming will adapt to the current political climate as it affects students. We must also deepen our connection between ASUW and OMD for United Front in the defense of DEI. These programs are not just about identity, they're about equity. And if there are federal constraints, I'll adapt by reframing our language while keeping our mission intact. For example, we can focus on student success programs or educational equity to protect the spirit of DEI while staying compliant.
Time. Thank you, Valeria.
For other candidates, what other policies or practices when it comes to addressing challenges of DEI and B programs would you use?
Hi, everyone. Well, I'd like to start off by fostering belonging through my own personal power. I recently had a really reassuring conversation with our university diversity officer, Ricky Hall, and he just told me to share with my constituents that the University of Washington and Washington State in general is very protected, even in these scary political times and in reference to some of the federal scares that we've had. The University of Washington is very protected, and he's doing everything in his power to fight for our rights and to fight for DEI. So I would definitely continue to implement these conversations when communicating with students next year. The 3 pillars of priority that I have in my campaign are actually made in mind that these threats are at hand. These being the Senate 5227 DEIMB training availability being the first one. This training is a voluntary training, which is kind of iffy, but at the same time, it makes it available to everybody, yet it's also avoiding legal conflicts because, and political backlash, because we can argue that it's not mandated. The second pillar that I want to implement is Wellness Week in collaboration with the Office of Student Health Relations. This office sits under the Director of Diversity Efforts and inside of the Joint Commissions Committee. I think that this is important to foster because in the worst case scenario that DEI gets attacked at our school, we must make sure our students are still feeling belonging and are mentally intact. Some of the events that I'd like to include are just self-care events and events catered around resilience in general, and I can go more into depth with that later. But yeah, my final pillar is about having strong RSOs, because if we do lose DEI efforts, then we still have like an informal DEI practice in our school, which is RSOs. RSOs are informal yet very, very powerful for the student body. Thank you.
Bye, Coyote. Bye, Coyote. Thank you. There you go.
So one of my biggest kind of policies around this is creating a united front. I've been really inspired by the state's reaction and DA's office specifically regarding how they prepare for any incoming attacks from the current administration. I think that's something we need to implement here. Utilizing the resources that we have, our researchers, our staff and faculty who've been trained in policy and trained in these areas for decades, as well as students such as the diversity commissions, the student advisory boards. We have the resources here to understand and prepare ourselves in the case that we face any current attacks. We've already heard memories, obviously. And so I think it's more important now than ever that we have contingency plans in place and that we have policy in place. That way it can't just be taken away from us. And it's not something that can be taken away from us. I think also we need to make sure that UW admin are holding up to their promises of diversity, such as the diversity blueprint, and making sure that they follow through with that, and making sure that any current renditions of that in the future, especially considering this most recent one is ending in 2026, are reinstated and that new versions are created intended to protect against this current administration. I think also uplifting student advocates and activists on campus alongside those who are lobbying in Olympia or at the federal level for our rights and for our protections for DEI programs is really critical. And I think working with the board of directors and me personally standing as an advocate for them and making sure they have the resources and protections that they need in order to do the work that they're doing for everyone, they're doing for campus. And I think making sure that their voices are heard and centered. And it's not always great to comply, and I think at times we need to resist. And I think this is one of those times.
Right, thank you, guys. Thank you. So let's see if there are any Slido questions. Okay, wonderful. So, yeah.
Okay, which one?
That's the top one.
Okay.
How will you draw in the voices of marginalized groups into ASUW efforts?
Yeah, so just reiterating, I want to implement a student testimony prep workshop, and I think that's a great way that we can implement the student voices into ASUW efforts, because again, like being an intern in the OGR office, I've seen our own interns do testimony, and not even that, but we also collect student stories and make up a book of Husky stories, which we take to Huskies Unbound and show to these senators and representatives. And I think that's a really effective way to move policies and also hear student problems. Thank you.
Yeah, so again, the Director of Diversity Efforts chairs the Joint Commissions Committee meetings every week, and these meetings consist of 15 different commissions and identity groups, advocacy groups that represent marginalized communities on campus. So I think that by working with the president next year on the RSO Leadership Summit and incorporating these commission leaders as well as RSO leaders, that way we get to really just foster their success and really cultivate their leadership skills and also kind of fasten the ties that they have with ASUW. I think instilling that notion of collaboration early in the year is really, really important because that way they get to remember how much that we help them later on. So yeah, really working closely with the Leadership Summit and ensuring that they have a smooth transition is something that I've been working in my position this year and that I plan on continuing to do. Just so people are getting onboarded efficiently and can therefore do their jobs in the best of their ways.
I think it's important that we uplift the student voice and give them more power than potentially they currently have. And that way, we as board of directors are not the center focus, their voice and their actions are. I think that also looks like giving more power to current programs here, especially those centered around marginalized groups such as the EEC, as well as the Office of Minority Affairs and Diversity. Giving them more power, more say, and more voice is really, really critical. And I think that's something that we can continue to do as a board of directors. I think also utilizing diversity commissions and student advisory boards to make sure that we are not the loudest voice in the room, that they are, and that their voices are the biggest.
Right, thank you, guys. We can actually get to our second question. Isn't that marvelous? Okay.
Okay, how will you measure the impact of your diversity initiatives, and how will you ensure they lead to real change rather than performative efforts?
So I actually had an idea to where we can measure student engagement in programming through like targeted outreach. We can track who comes to these events, and we can identify where we're lacking, and then from there we can do targeted outreach. And then I feel like with targeted outreach, we would be more intentional with our actions, our programming, and everything else. So yeah.
Yeah, I think this is a great question because it's definitely something challenging as measuring diversity efforts is like either diversity in itself and effort are both relative things. But I think that by utilizing the time that we have in our weekly meetings for JCC to make sure that each commission director and advocacy group leader is really taking the time to communicate with their constituents about how they're feeling and communicate with them about, hey, how is this event for you? What have you heard from your relevant constituents? That way we can effectively measure the success of these because it's going to be really close to impossible for one person to measure the effect of events catered to thousands of students. So by like dividing and conquering, I think we can utilize the times that we already have designated for these types of efforts.
I think really expanding on what the other candidate said, I think another part of it is research within the communities and having research groups centered on understanding what is your experience, how has your experience been affected by current initiatives, how has it not been affected, and that way that quantitative research can be used to understand how can we fix policy and where can we drop certain things in exchange for something else that works better or that a community says is needed instead. And so I think that's really important. I think also, again, some of the other candidates have mentioned, making sure that their voices are the loudest in the room through town halls, through meetings, and other things like that.
Thank you, guys. We have like a minute left. I think I don't want to rush you guys on the next question. So thank you, guys. Be having our University Affairs candidates come up, please. Yeah, that would be good. There we are. There we are. There we are.
Okay. So our first question here is for Kate. You discussed increasing transparency in decision-making processes by faculty at UW. Are there any specific ideas you have to achieve this so that students have a clearer idea of how higher level decisions are done?
All right, thank you so much for this question. I'm Kate, as you all know. I'm going to use kind of a case study example to illustrate what I meant when I talked about transparency and what I want to improve. So last year we had a UW presidential selection process due to the retirement of President Anna Marie Cauce. And as a student observer, I relied on groups like the Daily and then regular kind of provost update emails to inform me about this selection process. The Daily heavily criticized this process, calling it secretive, selective, special, and closed door. And the Washington Coalition for Open Government Leaders commented that it's impossible to know whether or not these regents were even choosing between candidates due to the fact that during Anna Marie Cauce's presidential election, she was supposedly the only candidate on the ballot. Now, I'm not saying these decisions were made poorly, but I'm saying that my point is when students don't know how decisions are made, they tend to speculate and they tend to get really anxious about it. And so as director of university affairs, I want to communicate with student groups directly to kind of mitigate some of that confusion. As one of the few people who has access to the spaces, I want to streamline the way that information is extracted from them and then published to the community. Instead of demanding that the provost office say these meetings are closed door or relying on strategically worded tips from reporters, I want to be the voice of those meetings and give you information directly from the source. This is going to be a multi-pronged communication strategy, and it's going to require multiple forms of outreach. So the first thing is just a baseline Director of University Affairs newsletter, a regular informational discussion of meetings that I'm going to, what I'm hearing at those meetings, and how they're affecting the community. The second thing is having DUA reserved time for you guys to come meet with me, communicate your concerns, and allow me to understand what's going on and how you feel that information is not being communicated. Finally, I'm going to make myself present. I'm going to go to your meetings using club lists, lists provided by departments for departmental affiliated clubs, and really getting out into the community and making sure that I'm talking to you where you are.
Thank you. For the other candidates, how do you intend to increase transparency and higher level decision making at UW?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Toa. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a public policy minor and also someone intending to go to law school. So I'm super excited to be here at the Student Policy Forum. I think we can all agree that transparency is something that's absolutely critical for ASUW to engage in, and something that we can do better at. So I have a couple policy ideas for how we can improve on this front. I'm going to jump around a little bit. I hope you'll forgive me. So the first one is Kate mentioned a DUA newsletter. This is something I've talked about in previous forums, and also something that the current Director of University Affairs, Kim Yu-Godden, is working on. I think this is an amazing idea, and I fully support it, but it's also something that I want to expand on a little bit. I think I at least have had the experience of signing up for a newsletter, maybe like a Substack, and it arrives in my inbox, and I just kind of never read it. So I would love to expand that newsletter service to be physical as well. This way it can be posted in places like residence halls, distributed to Greek life organizations, etc. And we could do some aggressive tabling efforts to really make sure we're getting it in front of the eyes of students instead of just in their email inboxes where they might never be seen. Another way that we could increase transparency would be holding town halls for big issues. We could do this either at the discretion of the Director of University Affairs or through gauging student interests in specific issues. I think that's a super big one. In-person engagement is something that's super important to me, and I think the best way to reach out to students and increase transparency. The third policy that I want to talk to you about is reforming the system by which we select representatives to faculty councils. Currently, ASUW uses the open selection process, which requires there to be at least 3 candidates in order to nominate that person. And while I think this is, in theory, a great way to do things, it really tries to holistically evaluate candidates and pick the best person for that committee. We've had chronic problems.
Time. Thank you, Toa.
Hey guys, my name is Alice and I'm a third year studying public health and minoring in public policy. Thank you for having me today. How I would increase transparency in the higher level decision making here at our university is, first of all, I would either serve on or be the liaison to many faculty administrative committees. And of course, they release their minutes, they release their dense reports. So let's be real, who's reading that? That's very inaccessible. And I will be serving on certain ones like the Faculty Council on Academic Affairs, Academic Standards and Student Affairs, but I'll also be appointing ASUW representatives to faculty committees and kind of relying on them to tell me the information that's happening. I
as the Director of University Affairs, I'll be required to compile quarterly reports on all of the committees. I don't think quarterly is enough. I think it should be monthly. And just as Toa and Kate have said, do a newsletter where I would summarize the key discussions, decisions, and most importantly, opportunities for students to have their voices heard in these decision-making processes. And just like state level bills are required to alongside their bill with all the legal jargon, have a bill summary that's a little more accessible. I think that the committee meeting notes and reports should also be required to have summaries, and that is a policy that I would love to bring as a board bill. And another thing, I would help the Office of Governmental Relations create the UW's legislative agenda, which is what UW students then take down to Olympia and lobby for. And alongside that agenda, I believe I would take it upon myself to release like an explanatory brief on the decision-making processes that OGR and representatives went through to create that agenda and the conversations that happened, as well as hosting public listening sessions on if students have questions on how do I lobby for this certain thing on the agenda. So I will work for you to increase transparency in decision-making by advocating for students, especially those who have had their voices suppressed in the past. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. And move on to the second question.
So our second question is for Toa. You spoke about bringing ASUW and UW administration in closer alignment with the priorities of the student body. How do you intend to navigate potential conflicts or differences between the students and UW administration?
Yeah, effective conflict resolution is something that's super close to my heart. I've spoken before about how I'm from a very white, very conservative small town, both things that I'm not. And so it's really important to me to have that effective conflict resolution. And I'll just take you through my specific process for doing that. So step one is to meet with and talk directly to community members and stakeholders who care a lot about the issue. An example of that would be working with Washburn, who currently have an initiative to make textbooks more accessible and affordable. I would want to talk to them about that with regard to my platform, which includes that initiative. Another example is today I actually had a meeting with the amazing director of our Students Disability Commission. And she told me about some policies that would be helpful for them at the university level. I learned that the DRS is severely under-resourced, and I never would have known that had I not gone directly to her. So that's my first step. My second step is a lot of intensive research. I'm an intern at the Office of Government Relations, and one of my important duties is to help compile policy briefings, which are documents that take a bill in the state legislature, break down exactly what it does, how it would affect students, and why it matters. And something that I've learned from this and from my lobbying work with the Office of Government Relations in general is that you really have to meet people where they're at. Sometimes you're going to have a disagreement with someone and it might be fundamental, but that doesn't mean that you can't work toward an effective solution. So as a good example, on Monday, I went down to Olympia with some other members of the Office of Government Relations to do some lobbying, and we met with lawmakers, or a lawmaker who's kind of hesitant to help us combat cuts to financial aid. They're worried about the budget deficit that Olympia is facing right now.
Thank you, Toa. Either way.
Okay, for the other candidate, what are policies or practices regarding communication between students and administration that you intend to enact if elected?
So regarding communication, I believe that first, students have to feel like their voices are heard and valued in order for them to have a positive relationship with their governing body, which is completely fair and valid. So one practice that I really hope to instill is where the Director of University Affairs goes to RSO meetings, goes to organizations, goes to their events, goes to I've never lived in a dorm, but like the RA sponsored events that they have, that's a thing, yeah. And I would go and say, hey, like, there's this certain faculty committee that we're going to appoint students to. I've done a little bit of research on your organization and your values, and I feel like your voice would have a great positive impact on students. How can I help you to empower you to feel like you can raise your concerns and raise your voice to the
people who work on the administration because I understand it. I understand it's daunting. Like we're adults, but they're like actual adults. It's hard to talk to them. I get it. I would love to host some trainings where I teach students and empower them to not only talk in these administrative committees, but also have a lobby. I remember the first time I lobbied down in the Capitol, my head almost fell off. Like, I didn't know how I would speak to these people who were literally elected, who have law degrees, who were elected to serve our state. But the thing is, they want to hear you. They want to hear student voices. And one thing I really want to do is value intersectionality. I feel that, especially in the current climate with DEI efforts, I think a diverse group of student voices is very important. It's more important now than ever. And lastly, an initiative I've currently been working on as the ASUW's Director of the Sexual Assault Relationship Violence Activism Administration is requiring that all sidebars of campus student pages include a link to student wellbeing services. Our current DUA is working on this, and I will be speaking about it in the Faculty Committee on Student Affairs, but I'll consider it.
All right. Thank you so much for this question. I think transparency and communication are really two sides of the same coin. And so I'm really excited to get to talk about my communication strategy and then also my transparency strategy previously. I plan to do a lot of outreach into the community like I expressed before and accept meaningful feedback at every junction to learn how my office can operate better. I won't spend time reiterating those points, and instead I'm going to talk about my relationship with OGR and how I plan to do student lobbying and use communication to lobby up in Olympia. I have a lot of friends who have tried to lobby through OGR and found that the legislative agenda doesn't allow for some of the lobbying efforts that they're really interested in. These are legacy groups like ICA, which is the Institutional Climate Action Group on campus, that really don't understand how these processes work. I'm really interested in creating educational materials on these processes to provide to groups on campus to let them know how they can get their issues into our legislative agenda and how they can use OGR's resources to lobby, even if they might not necessarily be on the legislative agenda for this year. Additionally, I want to use OGR staff to do outreach into the community and expand our lobbying education through workshops and educational materials. I know myself, I was a congressional intern, I was a campaign intern, and so I have a lot of experience interacting with some of these bodies that we're lobbying at. And I know a lot of the other incredible people at OGR have similar experiences that we should really share into our communities. I want to create workshops and educational materials, posters, infographics, you name it, we're going to do it for OGR to make sure that communication is as forward as possible and students know their rights as much as possible. Communication is key to every single thing that I've laid out here and everything I laid out in my transparency answer before. And there's no good way to serve as an ASUW representative without effectively communicating with our student body. Getting out into the community and giving back to the folks that give us so much is key to my job at ASUW.
Thank you, guys. We'll see any questions that are on Slido.
You want to do the Slido?
Let's start with the Slido.
So Slido, what groups do you feel are underrepresented and how would you increase collaboration with that?
Yeah, so as a political science major myself and in a group of a lot of political science majors, I think I echo the points of a lot of the previous people that have been sitting up here and saying that we're a very homogenous group and we need to get out and understand that maybe not everybody is exposed to the resources that we are. I know in my classes, we talk a lot about how the decision-making process happens, but a lot of people don't have those resources being handed to them through their major. So that's that goes back to kind of my point about OGR and how I really want to increase the ability of students that might not necessarily have that background in policy and legislative initiatives to kind of communicate with our leaders and to get their lobbying efforts served. Additionally, I'm really interested in collaborating with the Director of Diversity Efforts to understand what groups they're seeing are underrepresented and bring those groups into OGR and into the Director of University Affairs office. I'm really interested in making sure that groups like the multicultural Greek life organizations and underrepresented groups on campus that have organizations of their own are able to communicate through the Director of University Affairs and get their voices heard inside some of those faculty meetings and those provost meetings that I sit in on. So thank you.
So in my opinion, the same groups that are underrepresented kind of chronically across a lot of programs on campus and just in life in general are those same ones that I find underrepresented as it applies to work with the rest of the university affairs. For me, I'm a first generation college student. I'm also a student from a lower income background, and a lot of the work, Kate mentioned lobbying, that the Office of Government Relations does has a lot of applicability to students from those kind of backgrounds, and we don't have a lot of representation from those students who are directly impacted. So a specific policy that I would like to implement in order to kind of minimize that problem is working with community and technical schools, rural high schools like the one I came from, students with high proportions of recent immigrants and students of color and tribal schools in order to create pathways programs. I do see a lot of representation of people like me from my high school, my hometown, my area, who were able to come to big, amazing schools like UW and much less do things like lobby in state government and shape policy directly. And I think that showing high school students and as they come into UW, first year students, that they have a role here, we have made a place for them proactively is something that's super important and that will help to decrease this issue. Thank you.
I think groups who are underrepresented are those who didn't grow up in a culture where they feel that they're encouraged to be in or welcome in academic or professional spaces. And I'm mostly talking about the neurodivergent community and first generation student community. I happen to be both. And when I first got the offer to work on Senate Bill 5355, a bill regarding sexual violence prevention and response on higher education campuses, I didn't think I could because I have an autism diagnosis. I don't know if you can tell, but I can't make eye contact with people for more than a 5 seconds. And I was like, there's no way that I can sit alongside non-neurodivergent people and be able to speak in, and explain my views as correctly as they can. And I was talking to my parents who are immigrants and who have broken English, and they told me they would never even think about sitting in front of professionals and speaking their opinion just because they're embarrassed. They feel like they don't have the academic or professional ability to do so. And the people who do are those who have been systemically advantaged, and their voices should not keep being the ones that are uplifted. So I would love to host forums and host just community building groups with people who are neurodivergent, who feel that their English isn't the best, or their public speaking isn't the best, and empower them and tell them, here are some tactics you can use to speak, and also encourage them and tell them that the legislators, like, they're people too, and you are totally welcome to stutter, you are welcome to sim, all of this is okay. And another thing, another voice I would really like to uplift are the voices of immigrant and undocumented students. I understand that they may not want their voice to be uplifted due to safety issues, which I completely understand. And I will dedicate myself to meeting with them anonymously and being their liaison to voice exactly what they tell me without ever compromising their identity. Thank you.
Hi guys, you guys are great. We're gonna take like a 2-3 minute recess. I know it's been a lot. We're getting snacks in here, so we're just gonna wait until we get snacks. I know. So yeah, just walk around, talk to people. We're gonna get snacks in here soon. Okay?
Thank you, guys.
Get some water, people.
I don't think I have these. You guys have to be before April 18th. So that's all.
Did we?
Oh no, I made an announcement when I came. Oh yeah, I'm honest. But, you know, and I don't. No, because I didn't my focus.
I just know you didn't tell them. They told them they could get an enforcement. They're standing right here right now. And because they're not standing here, that makes it.
Yeah, it's well, like let's be so like on the website. No, not YouTube, but not. But you guys as well. Yeah, you guys have until yes.
I don't know if you must be looking.
Yeah.
But I did.
Of course, yes, whenever you're on like. We can. The snacks are up front, and if you have not had your loyalty ticket stamped, come up to the front. Again, if you have not had your loyalty ticket stamped, come up to the front. So where do I get my loyalty ticket?
Right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Say what?
Guys, those who want to get their thingy stamped, please come here. I want to give you coupons. Okay? Most candidates have been in 3. If I don't see 3 stamps on there, I would file a violation. Come on.
You have my antenna cord.
No, I.
Yeah, you should get a clip. Brianna, do you want to share the pic with me?
Okay.
No.
Tell them to no, but you were asking if we were. It's up to them. Like, that's what I'm saying. If you do like. Like, I don't know, and like in the group, I don't know if they want it.
Okay, guys. 1, 2, 3, or everyone gets a violation. 1, 2, violation. 1, 2, 3. Come on, sit back. Thank you. Awesome. Let's go. Everyone ready? Did everyone get their card stamped?
Get it ready.
Perfect. Awesome. Now we have Dip coming up. Ashwin and Simon, come on up. Be faster, guys. Let's go. Okay, perfect.
Okay, we're gonna get started with Ashwin. So in your campaign statement, you mentioned making it easier for students to navigate ASU Dub processes. What processes specifically do you think ASU Dub can improve, and what steps will you take to increase student engagement with ASU Dub?
Absolutely. Well, thank you everybody for being here. I know it takes a lot to come to the forum, so that's already half the battle done. So one thing I want to preface for my position specifically is that it's reliant on creating the best possible legacy and experience for us as students for the University of Washington, right? Codifying and guaranteeing the protections and culture that we as Huskies know and love. So with that being said, one of my main goals as Director of Internal Policy is to kind of demystify the internal operations of ASU Dub. Too many students are unaware of what they can do as a part of UW to kind of foster the same type of experience that they hope to instill. So specifically, some of the processes I believe need to be reformed are legislative transparency, right? Creating, making Senate more accessible, processes, bill tracking, and the voting outcomes. What is actually being created and what change is being made. Second, feedback mechanisms. How can students let me know what policies are actually, or what changes need to be made, right? You as students are creating your own experience and you need to come to me in order for that to happen. So let me make the process easier for you. And lastly, hiring and appointments, right? Clarifying how students can be more part of ASU Dub, actually fill the positions that they want to see and create the change themselves rather than being third parties. So in order to increase the engagement, I plan to hear student voices, specifically hosting open forums at least 3 times a quarter, where students can just voice their concerns, tell me what change you want to see, and let me try to make that process simpler for you. Second, collaborating with RSOs and cultural groups to make sure that underrepresented communities are specifically being met. The Director of Diversity efforts hopefully can work together in order for underrepresented voices to be heard. Lastly, let's launch a centralized student-friendly dashboard that kind of breaks down current initiatives to just make sure that everything is simpler and more, digestible for people to understand. Ultimately, at the end of the day, my only hope is that you as students come to me in order for me to help you. It's a reciprocal process, and I just want to leave the best legacy possible and make everybody's experience as hopeful and as bright as mine. Thank you.
Time, guys.
For the other candidate, what are your policies to streamline the bureaucracy of ASU Dub to make it more accessible and engaging for students?
Yeah, thank you so much for this question. Thank you guys so much for hosting this event and everyone being here. My name is Simon Thompson. I'm a political science major in the first year. So for this question, I had 3 words that really came to mind that I wanted to answer this with, and that's ease, incentive, and outreach. So with ease, I think of the part of the question that's asking about streamlining the bureaucracy. And so for that, I look to the question I'm about to get asked in a second. And it's about this portal that I want to make as Director of Internal Policy, which would get rid of the need to navigate layers of outdated links and confusing formats. I'm sure that almost everybody in this room has gotten on the ASU Dub website, and it is genuinely the most difficult website I've ever tried to navigate, and I have been on some websites that are like still pre-2006. So like, for an example, if you went outside of the hub right now and you found a random student, and you handed them a laptop and asked them to find the November 20th Judicial Committee minutes, I guarantee you that there's a 0% chance that that random student would be able to find that. So I think that's like the really important part of ease within the ASU Dub. And then next I go to incentive, and that is the engagement for students. And that's recognition for students to participate in ASU Dub internal conversations and input. You really want to give them a reason to be involved with ASU Dub. right? If you just think of ASUW as some boring process that is all about parliamentary procedure, like why would you want to get into these rooms and really talk about it unless you are a political science major? And that's why we've created this echo chamber for ourselves. I think it's also about advocating for RSO funding incentives for those that demonstrate commitment to ASUW engagement. And then my final one was outreach. You really have to make it more engaging. If students don't want to be engaged with ASUW, give them a reason. Collaborate and co-host events with RSOs to get them to be more connected. And I also think that it's utilizing current events and resources like A&E to amplify the purpose and opportunity of ASUW, right? A&E has a lot more outreach than ASUW does right now. So I'm at 2 minutes, so I'm gonna stop talking.
Okay, we're actually going to stick with Simon, and your question is, you discussed, excellent. Okay. You discussed creating a portal with simplified explanations of ASUW policies, bylaws, and meeting minutes. What outcomes do you hope to achieve in terms of student involvement with ASUW through this portal? And what other transparency accountability goals do you have in hopes to implement in your position?
Yeah, thank you so much for this question. So again, I'm going to give a little bit of an anecdote here. Earlier today, I was outside campaigning, and I would start my campaign by asking 2 questions. One, are you a UW student? And the next question I would ask is, do you know what ASUW is? And that was a really sad moment whenever I asked that second question a lot of the time. And like, I'm like so for real, like I was actually sad because it's like, there are $1.5 million of student money and you don't know what's going on with it. So I was just really, I don't want to say disappointed because I don't think it's at fault of anyone, but it was just really surprising to me. So one part of this is the increased student understanding that would come from this portal. And that's because there would be simplified language to help students grasp truly what ASUW is doing without the need to decode formal language. I also think that it would be a lower barrier to entry, right? So right now, students don't understand at all what's happening and won't attend meetings because they don't know what's going on. They won't give us feedback because they really don't know what ASUW is doing, and they won't run for positions, right? So that's a barrier to entry whenever you really have no idea what's going on with the ASUW, right? It also means more accountability for ASUW positions. If we have transparency and accessibility, it means that students can hold the ASUW accountable for its decisions and actions. Further, it's more accountability. More accountability becomes more stronger trust, where students see ASUW as open and easy to follow. It strengthens trust within the institution, and it furthers legitimacy. Right? No student with understanding of the importance of ASUW decisions would question its necessity and legitimacy within the UW. So real quick, my other ideas all come within internal transparency and accessibility. Right? It means including more ASUW voices and internal revisions. And it also means other oversight and following policy, working with the board of directors, coordinator, and ASUW. Okay.
For the other candidate, how do you plan to increase accessibility and transparency of ASUW policies for the student body?
Sure. I think accessibility and transparency kind of need to be broken down to 2 different things. But I think one thing that we can all acknowledge is that government is not the best at most times, actually a lot of the times. And so me acting within the board of directors is to just try and make that process less bad. So ultimately, let's break it down to transparency first. Making sure that it's, again, easily digestible and that people know what's going on, right? A lot of the changes are made for the students, and if the students aren't coming up to me to advocate for their own changes, they aren't able to monitor the changes that we are making. So ultimately, by hosting my forums and just getting enough feedback from the actual student population and body, I hope that ASUW is more recognizable as people that actually create change rather than being, again, the typical government that we kind of see. Secondly, we'll go into accessibility, right? How can people access our networks, our resources that we have? Simon mentioned we have a $1.5 million budget that simply people don't know about. And it's their money, they should be able to dictate where that money goes. Ultimately, transparency or I guess more accessibility all relies on how people can access ASUW. Not only is it just knowing about it, but how are people eager to get to know about it, right? And for us, we just need to become more friendly and more digestible to the student population. So by making ourselves more personable, by holding forums where people can come in, office hours that are more public, that are more activity based, that people can come into, to see us as friends and as students themselves and not some daunting board of directors. Like I hope to make board of directors more of a process where people will just come to us and say, hey, I know you are on the board of directors, you have some power, but you are also a student. We as students have this problem. Let's come together to fix this, right? Me in my own position, I'm not going to treat it as some power grab. Like I just want people to come and talk to me and to ultimately voice their concerns so that I can make a change for them. With that being said, vote Huskies on that. Thank you.
I kind of responsibility. Thank you. Right, just click escape. Okay, go over here until this. I cannot use this. They just need to wait until that shows up, and then you can click that. Okay. You guys got to vote on the questions, all the same. Which one's on the new ones? Okay, no.
Come on, guys. Vote on the questions or ask a question yourself.
I think this one is.
This is how democracy works.
Well, we're basing it on this thing.
Vernon does
it. Or ask a question. Yeah. Okay, so it's this one.
Okay. What do you see as the Judicial Committee's role in ASU Dub? And should it have more power to strengthen as a form of checks and balances on ASU Dub?
Yeah, so just to clarify for anybody that doesn't know, the Director of Internal Policy does oversee the Judicial Committee. And ultimately, yes, as kind of mentioned in the question, the Judicial Committee kind of acts like a watchdog, right? Making sure that the checks and balances are already in place with the Board of Directors. As I mentioned in my previous answer, sometimes and in previous times, like people are kind of scared of the Board of Directors because they hold more power compared to the student body. Ultimately, within the Judicial Committee, what I hope to achieve is just again, transparency, accessibility, all the things that we've already mentioned, but also just making it more personable for people to come to us and say, hey, we haven't seen the type of change that we want to see, and or I've come to a person on the board and they haven't made the changes, who else can I go to? I think the Judicial Committee as of right now is a little too structured, and I want to make it a little bit more personable to everybody else to sit into the Judicial Committee. It's also very accessible for people right now, but not a lot of people come to it. When I'm overseeing the committee as just a person that's leading it, I just want to create an open platform for people to voice any concerns, any violations to anything that we're doing. Along with that, like elections have gone great so far. The Judicial Committee hasn't come into practice as of yet, but hoping next elections go smoothly too. Again, Board of Directors and any type of government needs its check and balances, and in my position, I hope not to abuse it. And the Judicial Committee, again, as a watchdog, I'll just make sure everybody plays fairly and plays the game properly. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Wait, the timer's not going. Sorry. Okay, awesome. So with this question, I really want to focus on the second part of the question mostly, and that's the checks and balances part. And I really want to talk about a conversation that I had at, I think it was Monday's forum, and that was really talking about power within the Board of Directors. And I think a really important part of that conversation was the role of power within the Board of Directors. I don't believe that the Board of Directors is necessarily this group of people that should be seen at the top of the ASU Dub, but rather at the bottom. So to really explain myself real quick, the ASU Dub Board of Directors is really there to serve all of the employees and all of the students, right? So I think if you see it as being the most powerful, I think, it really speaks to your position on the Judicial Committee, those checks and balances, and really looking at how, looking at that power and really not understanding it as power to empower the voices of students, but rather as your own. And so I do think that the position of judicial is really important. Those checks and balances are really important, but I also think that there's other checks and balances that are also just as important, right? So I look to Senate and I look to the veto override. But I also think that that is why these elections are in place, is so that we are electing, people that are really competent for these roles and really understand what they're doing and are going to represent the student body. So yes, I do believe that the place of the Judicial Committee's role in ASU Dub is really important. Those checks and balances are really important that it does have.
but I also think that there are other checks and balances in place that are just as important and should be highlighted as well.
We have time for another question? Yes. How will the policies you implement reflect your understanding of ASUW governing documents? You can just look back. Just a second. Who wants to start?
Start. Okay.
Okay, awesome. So I really think that you can't make change within the policy without understanding the policy in the first place. I think both me and Ashwin will be very committed to understanding all of the policies that fall under the Director of Internal Policy. I'm saying policy a lot right now. But yeah, so I guess with my 2 minutes, one thing that I will do is highlight a change that I've talked about in other forums quite a bit. And that is within the personnel policy, and that is the lack of diversity training for our hirings, right? So we have over 70 employees, and there is no training for the hiring committees to make sure that we are implementing diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging within our hirings. And so I think that that is one way that I have shown that I will understand the policy that we do have, and I will use that understanding to create change that is really important to the students of UW.
Sure. Well, I think one thing that is said as a part of my platform is student outreach and student advocacy, right? Me in my position, I know the governing documents. I know which parts that people have specific concerns with. But ultimately, when someone comes with a concern and says, "Hey, the governing body or the governing documents have some type of gap in it," it's my job and responsibility to understand where the gap lies, but also see how we can amend it through the processes that we have. For example, Sam already mentioned the personnel committee, but another part that I want to kind of highlight is that not a lot of the governing documents actually have a concrete.
We don't have time for another question? Okay, you gotta go back. I cannot figure this out. I'm sorry.
At 5 minutes? Okay. All right. Thank you, guys. We will now have the vice presidential candidates. Yeah. Thank you, Sky.
Okay, so we're going to start with Colin. In your campaign statement, you discussed creating more events for all UW students. What specific events do you hope to create that will find commonality and empower different student groups? How does your leadership experience with the Social and Inclusivity Committee at the University of Washington inform your approach?
Hi there, I'm happy to be here. My name is Colin. Thank you so much. This question is great. It's all about event planning, my specialty. Firstly, to answer the question about what types of events, that's just any events that students actually want to go to, whether that's dances, whether that's movie nights, whether that's concerts, just anything that has positive feedback in the past, we want that in the future. And we want to also maybe eliminate events that weren't so popular and didn't have great impact on student life. Secondly, not only do I want to create more unique UW traditions here, I need these events to be recurring. These events need to be scheduled ahead of time. We got to know 2 weeks out, 1 month out, these are happening, don't we? And I need these events to happen maybe once a week, once a month, depending on the scale of them. And scheduling these events so that they happen recurring is easier for everyone. It's easier for the students. You know, we have work, we have places to be. We need to know if we're going to be able to be there. It's easier for that administration so they can approve this earlier on. It's easier for the staff. It's easier for the venues, you know, whatever building we're using on campus. They want to know what we're going to need to use. My third point is that these events need to happen late at night. We don't want events ending at 9 p.m. I'm not going to bed at 9 p.m. If we have events on weekends, we're growing up, aren't we? If we have events on weekends, I have work till 9. Last week we had a dance, right? I couldn't make it unfortunately because it ended at 9. And I only knew about the event 4 days in the future, so I couldn't get off work. And these events will also serve as alternatives to off-campus events, which might not be safe. And regarding SICK UW, we just got approved as an RSO, and I've been working like crazy on the first event, which is happening next month. As a president, I've been leading a team writing grants as well as writing appeals, which I love to do. In fact, I got into school on appeal. And my final point is I want to know. Thank you.
For the other candidates, what are your plans to work with ASUW entities to create more engaging events for students to attend that would be different from past years?
Yeah, so I'm super excited about this question because I am our current director of programming here at ASUW. So I'm all about events. But one thing I've learned this year being the first year that really students wanted to engage in ASUW events is learning from our successes and witnessing the events that really did work, but then also learning from where our shortcomings were. Clearly, marketing has been something that we have been working on this year. So something that I really want to focus on next year is to work with the next director of programming and create a programming and marketing committee with the Office of Communications to be able to uplift the events that are currently going on. Because the problem is not that we don't have events, it's that they're not being, we don't have enough outreach. So we want to make sure that our marketing is not only intentional, but targeted, timely, and also creative. I also want to work with ASUW entities to leverage their own constituent base. Similarly to our Black Student Commission, right now they have an RSO group chat. So they can help leverage each other. Neviat right here created that. And so each RSO can invite each other to their events and create these cross-community communication channels, like a student-wide event Discord, so people know what's going on, or an RSO Discord so we can help amplify and diversify our volunteer bases, because we all know that we're going to need super many volunteers next year. And not only will this connect students, but it will inevitably lead to cross-campus collaboration, which will then inherently lead to new, fresh, engaging, and exciting events, because you have more hands on deck, which equals more creativity, which equals more outreach. Thank you.
Hey everyone, I'm Jenna. I use she, her pronouns. And I think when we're talking about events, I mean, Peyton really touched on it. Like this is really the director of programming who I want to work really close with and making sure that we are planning, executing events that are engaging, that are also accessible. We heard from our director of programming candidates earlier tonight, and I wanted to highlight something that Rhiannon had said, which was about making all of our events as accessible as possible. Especially if our events are not accessible, we cannot have engaging events. That is kind of the bottom line. If our students cannot come to these events, then we can't make them exciting and engaging. And then I also would really want to work with our current director of programming, who happens to be sitting here, and just talk about what things did and didn't work this year. Because I believe in learning from our past mistakes and also our successes. So I want to hear about what things went well, what kind of promotion went well, what kind of events did students like or not like. I know students really like free food. How can we, make more events around like having something that they are really excited about going to? Because ultimately, I want to make events and promote events that are really exciting to all students.
Yeah, hello everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Sonal Virk, and I'm a second year here at the UW. I really enjoy this question because this is something that we must emphasize, something that we have not already seen in the past, right? I know we have legacy events here. Those events are huge. We engage thousands of students at once, but how can we make engagement linear? How can we make sure that our students are not coming at one event, thousands at once, but keeping that and maintaining that as like 20 students this week? We have a new engagement happening. We have a new event happening, 30 the next, 40 the next, whatever it may be, correct? And so I think based off of my experience, so actually on Monday, it is Vaisakhi, and I'm actually a Punjabi Sikh. So I advocated very closely with the Consulate General of India here to go to the capital and get recognition for the first time ever at the state capitol. Vaisakhi is being recognized, and I am a youth advocate, and I will be giving a speech there as their youth Sikh Punjabi representative. And apart from that, I was like, how about the other untapped communities we have here at the UW? How about in general in Washington State? Have they had the opportunity to go to the Capitol? Have they had the opportunity to have collaboration within the ASUW? Because we have commissions. We have amazing commissions here with amazing directors and assistant directors. And they are willing to give the resources. They are willing to collaborate. And that is something we are lacking here at the University of Washington. And by making that clear, having like a calendar, let's start off with a calendar with all national holidays and international holidays. Let's see what we can do. And by then we can do active outreach to bring them in, to bring in those leaders and be like, hey, can we please have an event? Can we have collaboration? Even a shout out would be amazing. That's how I started off at the Capitol. I was like, can we get a shout out? And they were like, you guys have 30 minutes. And I was like, that's more than enough. So enhancing collaboration and having active outreach is the first step to having those events that we haven't seen before.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to our second question. We're going to start with Jenna. Your campaign statement goes into detail about outreach initiatives, internship and career fairs, lobbying for students, and direct outreach to classrooms. How do you measure success in these areas, and what other methods can be used to connect with a wider range of students?
Thank you so much. Success can come in so many different formats. And even thinking about, we have this goal of higher voter turnout in our ASUW elections. And of course, our elections committee does a really good job in trying to promote this, like ASUW elections in general. But it's also the work of our ASUW employees for an entire year of outreach. And so these are all little things that are successes that go beyond just the pure numerical outcome of voter turnout. And so for me and my platform, like I said, I really want to host a career and internship fair to create more student opportunities for professional development within the ASUW. And the success for that will look much more than just being able to facilitate that event. We can put on events, but if we want people to come and we want to engage with people, that is where the success is going to lie, is if we have more people applying to ASUW jobs. And if we have more people coming in to talk in office hours to ASUW board of directors, and being able to make those connections individually with students is so incredibly important and something that I will see as a lot of success if I can make those connections while having those events. And that's the same thing I feel for outreach in classrooms, in RSOs, in FIGs, making those connections, that is the success. The success is not just being able to hit 100 classrooms. The success is about showing the resources that ASUW has. And further, one of my biggest policy priorities is helping student lobbyists and supporting them in DC and Olympia. And success can look like, of course, the advancement of policy and legislation, but it can also look like showing students how to sign in pro for legislation and how to represent their voices in Olympia and testify for what they believe in and testify for their stories and sharing their voices. And so success can come in all of these different forms, and I intend to celebrate every single success that I have, because every success that I have will be a success for all students. So thank you.
All right, so.
Nope, we have the other candidates.
Oh, do we want to go in order for the other?
No, this.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
No, you last time. Yeah, no, you were. Oh, cool. Sorry, no, you were stopped. Were you stopping? Sorry.
No.
Oh, okay. No. Sorry, I thought you were stopping me. Moving on. Okay, for the other candidates, how do you measure the success of your policies for ASU? Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm a business student, and in everything that we do, we have KPIs. I don't know if we have business students here in the building. Yep, there we go. KPIs are key performance indicators. And basically, for example, like today, I could have came into this forum saying I want to engage at least 50% of my audience with what I'm saying. So that is like the statement moving on. From there, that is the clear statement that we have before actually indicating like research and collaborating and making sure that we have all the right information before implementing a policy. So I would start off, for example, one of my platforms is advocating for accessibility here on campus. My key performance indicator would be, hey, I want to increase at least 25% of our buildings here on campus to be accessible, whether that's through signage, whether that's through accessible elevators, whether that's through implementing ramps, whatever it may be. That is my goal, and that's where I will start. And from there, I would move forward by collaborating with DRS, by collaborating with our internal ASU commissions, Student Disability Commission, Office of Inclusive Design, to ensure that we have the correct information, to make sure that we have key metrics in order to make correct solutions. And then from there, I can hold myself accountable. By the end of my term, I'd be like, hey, did I increase or did I not increase by 25%? And hopefully that would be yes, but that would be based off of the research that I already did, right? So it would be, we're at about 50% of our buildings being accessible. And for me to reach that goal, it would have to be up to 75%. And I'm a finance major, so I'm all about numbers. I'm all about research. And I think that is a great way to incorporate policy as well. I also took an intro to public policy course, and shout out public policy. And they basically told us, they were like, before identifying a policy, make sure that you identify the policy problem as simply as possible. And that is exactly what a KPI is as well. So making sure I'm incorporating both of my wheelhouses and my expertise to get to a correct solution is really key. Thank you very much.
So the way that I gauge success in policy is simple. It's going to be student engagement. And the way that we see student engagement can be through numbers, it can be through data and analytics, but we should be able to feel and see a change around campus and the social climate. And that might not happen until the end of my term, but if that happens, that's the overall goal. And we can't expect students to become more engaged. We need to reach out to them. We need to tell them why it's cool to work with ASU. We need to tell them why it's cool to volunteer, why it's cool to go lobby. And without us doing these, we're not going to expect to see any sort of change anytime soon. So I feel that there's a lot of accountability on our part as the ASU Dub to really get people involved and see that change. Thank you.
I also realized I forgot to say my name the first time. I'm Kate Sachs, hey, and I'm running for VP, so I thought I would just reiterate that. But to define a policy problem, pretty simply put, ASU Dub has an accountability problem. Not all students, we have to recognize, access and experience the policies and resources that we have in an accessible and equitable manner. Not only do we need to uplift the voices of these students, but we have to platform them. So to create a solution to that, I want to create a task force across campus advisory board, not only with different department student representatives, Greek Life chairs, ECC, RSOs, and our ASU Dub commission heads, to be able to check in once a month with each other to see how our policies are actually taking place in these different places on campus. Whether that be measurable through whether things are accessible, are our policies easy to navigate and understand? B, are they adaptable? Like, are they working in different spheres on campus? Are students getting that adaptability from our policies? And see if they're successful through actual tangible data measurements, whether that be through numbers and how many people are actually utilizing your resources and accessing them, or is it also through the power of student voice and student testimony, through office hours, through anonymous reporting, through surveys? I think that we need to assign ASU Dub entities who are most equipped and have the capacity to follow through on these agenda items to not only show up for our students, but show up for our staff. And I will make sure to check in with my people. Thank you.
All right, thank you guys. Considering that we are past 7, and I do apologize for that. We won't have time for like audience questions, but thank you guys.
Thank you.
Here we have the presidential candidates come up now. You can ask him. Dag, can you?
Dag.
Ag Valley.
Over.
You be doing that.
Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get started with Dag Malley, and your question is, in your campaign statement, you pledged to focus on transparency, collaboration, and equity. What do those values look like in this role to you, and how will you operationalize them in your work? What specific collaborations and partnerships are you hoping to forge?
Well, hi guys, I'm Dag Malley, Shelby, or I go by Dag, but I'll try and make this quick because I know y'all got homework. But transparency means showing up for every student and showing exactly where the fees are going and giving them real input and actual decision making that ASU Dub means. I'm aware that there's already systems in place, like the fees before you register and email updates from your current ASU Dub president. But your money, your say is not just a slogan, it's a promise that I'm trying to make. And I want to make spending breakdowns public and easy to access and easy to understand, because at the end of the day, if we're paying for campus life, we definitely deserve to shape it. Collaboration's another one. Collaboration means actually working with fellow UW students and not just speaking for them, actually listening. That's a big thing in my campaign. One-on-one interactions and understanding different perspectives. That's super important. I'll build stronger connections between ASU Dub and RSO cultural centers and NW-based groups. Monthly events like I'm trying to make food trucks on campus and make Red Square and Denny Hall super active. Like I want that to be a campus culture just mecca where everybody's having fun, food trucks, art fairs, just a bunch of different cool stuff to give ASU Dub a human and more approachable face. And equity means meeting people where they are, understanding their perspective and recognizing that support looks different for everybody. I'll push for better visibility and access to mental health sources, especially ones that are culturally competent. That includes collaborating with the D Center, OMAD, Q Center, and other affinity orgs and programs and peer support spaces that feel safe and relevant. There's no reason a student should be in the dark about decisions that are made on campus. Ultimately, we pay for it. And I just want to make a personal connection to this. I used to run track in high school, had a great track coach. My track coach used to say, running with faster people creates faster progress. And that's exactly the same energy I'm trying to bring to this campaign. Running with
time. Thank you.
We'll get to that later.
Okay, for our other candidates, what are your efforts to institutionalize reform, the ASU Dub, that better support our partnerships with other campus groups?
Hi, everyone. I'm Lydia, and I can go first. So as ASU Dub president, if elected to this office, there are a couple of things I'd like to see reform within the ASU Dub, and one of them being our hiring committees and the way we go about training. Again, as mentioned, ASU Dub hires over 70 employees, and we are actually one of the largest, if not the largest, nonprofit organization in the state. So for us to have no type of training prior to a hiring committee being assembled is inadequate. And right now I've been working with UW HR to see how ASU Dub can implement an anti-bias training for all those who are committee members of hiring trainings, as well as something I would like to implement would be the work of SB 522, Senate Bill 522, which forces students to take a diversity training prior to stepping foot on campus. Although it's optional, I would like to just reserve time during the ASU Dub employee orientation for all employees to take that training and familiarize themselves with the content on there. I think it's really important, obviously, with the climate of the world right now, for us to be aware of our privileges and also aware of the things marginalized students face on campus and how we as leaders can just help them be comfortable and help each other work better and more accessibly. Additionally, I would like to just enhance our marketing efforts, which would also go into the hiring committees and how many people we're hiring. So it was mentioned earlier, KPIs, key performance indicators. As president, I would love to work with the executive advisory board to create KPIs for our organization, specifically for hiring committees at first. So basically measuring how many people are applying for certain jobs, and through accessible outreach and marketing, how those job changes, how those employee applications are changing and how people are finding them and how many people are actually applying for jobs. I've been in ASU Dub for a couple of years now, and it's quite disappointing to see the lack of applicants, especially because these are paying employed jobs. They're really beneficial for students. So those are just a couple of things I'd like to see change within our institution. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brennan Lumpkin. Focusing on the part of the question that
really is about supporting partnerships with other campus groups. Right now, I serve as the chair of the Student Advocacy Council in the CS school, which is basically like ASUW for the CS school. At least what we're trying to pivot towards. And I've been there for 2 years and never once have I ever met with an ASUW representative. And that's basically the governing student group of, one of UW's more substantial schools. And then talking to the IFC president and the Panhellenic president, neither of them have ever heard from the president directly. And, in running for this campaign, I can't say that I knew exactly what my platform wanted to be built on coming into this. And so that's why I talked to so many people, everyone. And I think that this has been what I've been talking about from the get-go. Just I want to be someone that's talking to everyone face to face. Naomi's email from earlier today discussing her role as president, she described it as the most outward facing role in ASUW. And I think that that's something that can be, it's easy to talk about and it's easy to say, but I think executing that and building that into your calendar is something that's really important. Some of the past most successful, most impactful presidents, Osman, Mustafa, Tyler Wu, I've talked to all of them and they said, their calendars while they were president looked like a unicorn threw up on them. Like it's just an array of colors. And that's what I hope my calendar looks like. And that's really what I want to value my talks.
Hi everyone, I'm Andal. I'm so glad to be here. And I think a problem with ASUW elections is that a lot of candidates come in with ideas for internal reform, but I really value prioritizing helping students over just reforming our bylaws. As a Senate Speaker, I have intensive experience examining our bylaws, amending them to improve Senate efficiency and efficacy. But really, I think the biggest impact I've had this year as Senate Speaker is transforming the culture of Senate. And that's my guiding principle that I would bring into my role as president. I really believe in shared governance, and that's what I want to implement. And that's the ideal that students deserve to have just as much of a stake in decision making as administration. And that's a big goal that requires big changes. For example, creating a chamber that brings together faculty senate, student senate, GPSS, represents graduate students, as well as top level administrators like the president, all in one group to discuss policy. And this would really force administrators to confront students head on and really justify their decisions directly to students instead of just over emails that they can ignore. On top of that, partnerships I want to continue to foster include organizations like LiveWell, Husky Health, and the Campus Sustainability Fund. And on the Campus Sustainability Fund has been working hard to create a Student Sustainability Council, which brings together student leaders in sustainability from all over campus. And this is an ASUW's effort, but I think ASUW should go all in and support this and under other initiatives like this. I think ASUW is not an RSO. We're also not a top-down government telling students what to do. Instead, we're a central resource, and we really need to be uplifting the really great work that students on campus already do.
Okay, 2 more questions. Hopefully they don't kick us out. Oh, sorry. I'm so sorry. No, my apologies.
Okay, wonderful. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you, EAC, Student Bar Association, as in school. We're super grateful to be here with Client Ticket, Husky Fund Bound. So we've heard time and time again tonight the 2 primary concerns, funding, marketing. So I just want to talk about the work that's been done so far and the work that I intend to do with elected president. So ASUW has a $1.4 million budget. We all know that. And it's really up to us on how we want to utilize that money. And I believe that reducing operational costs and giving that money back into the hands of the students is going to be my primary goal as president. And making sure that we don't consume our own funds. Instead, we invest it back into these events that students want to come to and these advocacy initiatives that we've been trying to do all year. And streamlining communication is another huge thing. I worked with the Office of Outreach and Involvement this year to kind of have them merge with the Office of Communication so that next year the administration is set up to have a more 2-way communication street where we're not spreading our marketing efforts too thin, essentially. And I'm
by better allocation of funds, what we're really going to do is improve partnerships with all these different campus communities, because this way our SOs can have more access to money. If we kind of revamp and see where the special appropriations fund can be increased, because it is so expensive to like book Kane Hall if you want to like host an event. So making sure that we advertise these to RSOs so that, and we increase the bandwidth of these funds instead of like having ASUW just be this thing that vacuum that just consumes these student dollars. And if we improve operational efficiency, the student activities fee will be way more incentivized to give us more money year after year so that we can continue these amazing programs. And whether it's student menstrual products, the STI checks, the care packages with Live Well, Husky Health, those are the things we should be focusing on. Those are the things we need to be spending our money on, and making sure that the special appropriations fund is not the only way for ourselves to get money, that we do more than that and go beyond the bare minimum.
Thank you.
Okay, next question is to Vernon. You have said that others view you as a consensus builder. What does this specifically look like for you as president? How do you find commonality across diverse groups and opinions?
Yeah, I'm glad the questions were asked in this order, so I could go this way. I just want to start with like a really brief anecdote that will become relevant in a second. So I used to work at Starbucks, the one down in Madison Park, and during my lunch breaks, I would just sit alone, get my free sandwich, get my free drink, and kind of just like watch YouTube or something. And I realized that felt like an incredible waste of time and not really a testament to how I like living my life in kind of an ultra social sense. So what I would do is I would pick random customers in the store and I'd ask to sit down with them and have a conversation with them. Sometimes they were alone, sometimes they were in groups. This one particular day, there were 3 women in a pretty invigorated conversation. I sat down, they first denied me, and then they told me 2 minutes later to come back. And that was how I met Michelle Storms, who's the executive director of the ACLU of Washington. The reason I want to tell this story is because I think that it's my repeated offenses of pushing past social boundaries that allow me to hear so many different diverse perspectives from people that ordinarily I would not meet. I think that I do not develop the consensus of the platform that I'm pushing right now, but rather the opinions that I hear from, I take all that information and I give it to people that I think definitely have a lot much more experience than I do in this region. Leadership that has been, adults that have been involved with UW's leadership for years, and they've seen trends, they see what rises and falls. People like Denzel Sweet, past presidents. I am here to serve as a conduit to the student population, all relevant groups, and to feed that information to people that honestly would know better what to do with it than I do, and then push that agenda.
Okay, for our other candidates, how do your leadership skills foster not only a community in the ASUW, but among all UW students?
So one thing that I've learned as Speaker of the Senate, as well as a member of board last year, is how to lead discussion on controversial issues, difficult issues, and how to navigate disagreement. And one thing I'd really like to do is extend that to the university as a whole. I don't think it's ASUW's job to pick a side in a disagreement, but rather to foster communication and productive conversation. It's part of our mission statement to develop future leaders. And what that means to me is equipping students with the tools to respectfully disagree and to really come together and collaborate. And something else I'm really passionate about is thinking outside of the box, combining different perspectives and coming up with solutions. So for example, I think a lot of other student governments, I think there's so much we can learn from them. For example, the UC schools, their student government runs the dining halls as well as student publication. And as a result, they've seen a lot more direct investment, more of an impact on students' lives, and just more involvement in general. And I think by communicating with student leaders across the country, we can pull in ideas for what sort of services ASUW can provide for all students and really create that engagement. Something else I talked about at the DEI&B forum on Monday was the fact that my department, Electrical and Computer Engineering, has a DEI council like Vernon said, there's student advisory council in the Allen School. And I really want to establish more of these councils in different departments and really get a wide variety of students, not just poli-sci students, involved in decision-making, connect them with faculty, and institutionalize DEI practices so that the federal government can strip them away. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, hi everyone, Lydia again. So I just want to say that aside from my leadership skills, I just think my life experiences as a first generation college student has led me to realize what the importance of a leader is and the important values of a leader, especially when stepping foot on a college campus. The world can feel so big, sometimes too big, and it can just feel like really hard to navigate certain avenues. And I think being a proper leader means leading with empathy, compassion, and also being resourceful. So for example, right now I'm planning the Joint Commission Committee's JCC week and just helping them along with that, and helping streamline communication. And one thing we've been doing is reaching out to RSOs, and I've taken that initiative upon myself to just reach out to RSOs, because I think sometimes as ASUW leaders, we mistake reaching out versus waiting for people to reach out to us, being kind of just two separate things. And I think it's really important the ASUW president to reach out to people and not wait to be reached out to, because you are the one with, we would be the ones with so much resources and just various programs for them to kind of take up on. So I think something I would hone in and foster on as ASUW president would again be leading with compassion and empathy, and working with various student leaders across campus to create a DEI safety toolkit for them, especially with the current climate of our world and our campus and our federal executive orders that are coming out constantly. I think it'd be really important to work with students to identify issues and problems and concerns regarding their safety on campus, and how we can create a safety toolkit for them to use and to have available to them regarding certain phone numbers, hotlines, etc., regarding various things like ICE agents on campus and what it means for visas getting revoked. What does that mean? And how can you ensure that you're safe, and who can you turn to if you feel unsafe? And that's something that no one person can do alone. So just making sure I reach out to people with compassion and empathy and be resourceful when reaching out, and not waiting for them to give me a response, but going to them with a solution to a problem they may be facing. Thank you.
I definitely agree with Lydia. ASUW Pres should not wait for people to come to them, but go to them. But I think ASUW, we all know, is made up of students, but there's still a huge disconnect between all students. And when I say all students, I mean Greek life, different people from different ethnic groups off campus, and other students. But I'm not running because I've always felt involved, but I'm running because I haven't. And I know what it's like to not be in the conversation. That's why I think I'd be a great candidate in this role. And I see what needs to change because I've experienced it myself. I care about making things clearer, like where our fees go. I care about bringing life back to campus, the food trucks and music and events that people actually want to go to. And I care about making mental health support not something you have to go dig to find. It should be accessible at all times, because it's okay to not feel okay. I'm here to shake things up, not blend in, and I definitely want to make sure every student knows exactly who's in their club.
Okay, perfect. I want to start off by saying really wonderful question. But I think going into this campaign, I really want to end the distinction between ASUW community and UW community. ASUW is your community, and my job will be to be there for all students and lead effectively so that all of our 70 employees, not just me, work directly and actively to foster communities for all of their constituents and groups that they liaison to. I think that my most wonderful experience in terms of working with different groups of people has been as VP of Diversity for the Washington Student Association. So we worked on creating a collective statewide DEI&B statement, and I had to work with almost every public university in the state of Washington and a couple community colleges to make sure all input was collected and make sure everyone felt happy with the statement that we're publishing with all of our names on it. And I think that really gave me experience into incorporating all sorts of diverse ideas into a collective movement. And I think my background working with youth advocates at the bus, I've been lobbying since I was in high school, and working with families with One America has made me really confident in my abilities to bring together groups from all kinds of backgrounds to fight for collective change, essentially.
And again, other candidates emphasize this, being approachable and keeping your doors open. Visit RSOs, be a good liaison, and actively listen and accurately represent student views. On the Monday forum, I was asked a really good question about how ASU presidents are often like silent during times of distress. And I think that's what really sets me apart as a leader, because I'm not afraid to hear no. As director of university affairs, I had a direct audience with the president and the provost. And there were so many times they would just look at me and be like, I'm sorry, that's not possible. But that's my job, is to not take that answer, but it's essentially to go back and bring those students with me next time and say, hey, we're not going to take that, and continue lobbying effectively, whether it's admin, whether it's at the state, to make sure every student feels heard. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Okay. Thank you everyone for coming up. That's it. Because we don't have any more time.
Awesome. Guys, stay in your seat for just a little second, okay? Awesome. Yes. I know I'm terrorizing, but it's just a part of personality. We're having an ASU fair. It's on April 18th. To all the candidates that have not RSVP'd, please do so. We're going to have a kind of candidates table. So if you want to see it there, RSVP right now. Do not use your ASU email. I would file a violation if that happens next time. Okay. Second, there's going to be a presidential debate, and VP is going to have one question. Just remember that. Again, RSVP, make sure you do that. And those who want to are just there, you can also RSVP. We're going to have a bouncy house. We're going to have stage. We're going to have mini golf. We're going to have basketball hoops. We're going to have ring toss and food trucks. So yeah, okay. Thank you so much for coming. Have a good day. Have fun.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone. Thank you.
Yes, sorry, Dubs would be there too. 1 to 2 p.m.
Thank you. Like an hour? It's just gonna be there. I forget that. That's the
Can I give you my feedback directly?
Huh?
Can I give you my feedback directly?
No, I'm tired.
Okay, you're an amazing.
What do you want?
You're an amazing person, and you did a great job.
I think you're Sean.
Also, there should be audience questions for president.
We ran out of time, Sean.
You have budgeted more time.
Go. That's from something else. Oh, do you need to? Well, thank you guys for showing up. Send it to me. Yeah, I'll send it on my call. Thank you. Thank you guys again. Of course, if there's anything else you need from us, just let us know. Thank you.